It's very easy for you to slip into believing that you're doing it for others. You're suffering because the other is in pain. You're suffering because the other is hurt. You're suffering because you're trying to bring justice to somebody else. Let me share a very beautiful journey of a young man. He was in one of the youth festivals that happened, and he came from US. He had lost his father just a couple of weeks before, and then he came straight to India. And then after being in India for a week, he went back to his country, to the US, and then he was in the group call where he was meeting other fellow participants and sharing their experience on a call. And he wanted to share. So he said, I lost my father a couple of weeks before the process. And I was in very deep suffering. I was in very deep pain. Then I heard the teaching on self-centric, obsessive thinking, that being the root cause of suffering. And immediately I said, no, I'm suffering because I love my father. How could it be self-centric? How could it be obsessive? He dismissed the teaching for some time. But then he started slowing down. And he brought attention to his inner pain. He brought his attention to his thinking. He was seeing it very slowly, very clearly. He said, the thinking was all around, why did you leave me and go? What would happen to my future? Who will take care of my education? Why should I be responsible for mom and my brother and my sister? He said, I thought I loved my father the most. And that was the reason behind me withdrawing from everybody else and me moving into this deep suffering. But when I began to see my thinking, when I began to see my suffering in the light of this insight, that suffering is self-centric, it is obsessive, it is a preoccupation with oneself. When I began to see it, then I was able to see that, yes, it is only about me. It is not about my father. He said, on seeing it, I experienced freedom. On seeing how much it was just about me and me and me, there's nothing about my father in that suffering. It is not about the other at all. I was able to free myself from suffering. And then, he said, I became present to my mother. I had just disconnected from my mother. I was so preoccupied with my own suffering that I was not there for her for so many weeks. It is only when I was able to see that this suffering is nothing but a preoccupation with oneself, then I got back, began to experience my mother, began to experience my siblings, and I was there for them. We're talking about a man who had just lost his father. And he was able to see it. It is easy to dismiss saying that you're doing stuff for the other's sake. But if you bring a torchlight and you begin to observe, you will see that the story is only about yourself. If you are suffering. Suffering means an obsessive, self-centric thinking. You do not have space for the other in your heart. It is so much of preoccupation with yourself. You could be living with a very beautiful family. You can have a wonderful child sitting next to you, but you're not present to them. You're disconnected. because that is the nature of suffering itself. It can be hard because you would have believed that you're doing things for others, that you're being righteous, that you're asking for justice for somebody else. But if it is causing anger, if it is causing fear, if it is causing sadness, please bring your attention and look at it very deeply.